Good morning, Rita.
Good morning, Rick.
Uh, I wonder if we could start by just introducing yourself very briefly.
So I'm Rita Wibbler. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a mindfulness meditation teacher and also an executive coach.
Okay, great. And I first met you because you gave a talk to the Harvard Kennedy School. Um, can you uh, summarize what your idea is of mindful leadership?
Well, that could take a long time, but I'm going to try and be succinct here. I don't have a definition as such, but the elements of mindful leadership, and I'm basing um, my thoughts here on the work by Janice Materano, who's a leading figure in mindful leadership research and also facilitation. The elements of mindful leadership are compassion, focus, clarity, and creativity. So those elements all have to work together. And I think the overriding element, though, to me would be self-awareness.
Mhm.
That to me brings in things like being aware and being available to respond to situations with clarity, focus, creativity, and so forth. So that's sort of the bottom line for me.
Okay. And now people have heard of mindfulness meditation, but mindfulness is a broader conception than just meditation. So, um, what are some examples of how one can be mindful in a non-meditative situation?
Um, well, we talk about daily mindfulness or informal mindfulness sometimes, and those could be any moment in your when you're breathing, so to speak, and not and being awake and not sleeping, where you are able to bring yourself back to the present moment. This could be while you're brushing your teeth, while you're eating, while you're entering a meeting, in a meeting, leaving a meeting. Um, any state where you feel like you're really present. So
Mhm.
mindfulness, the definition of it is to be able to be in the present moment without judgment and purpose. And so that could be anytime, wherever you are, any place,
Mhm.
basically speaking.
Okay. And mindfulness calls for, as you said, judgment, a lowering of one's reactivity,
Mhm.
uh, being more compassionate, having a sense of acceptance. Um, But now, for a leader in either a business environment or a political environment where there is conflict, would mindfulness make you a doormat?
That's a interesting question, and a thought that probably some of us have had now and then. Well, of course, the answer would be a rigorous no. The perception might be there that you might be sort of like without a drive or just say yes to everything. But when when you talk about acceptance, um, but it really mindfulness is not so much about not reacting. It is about that. It is about responding in a conscious, intentional way, and so that takes a lot of effort. And it doesn't mean that you're not getting angry, that you're not getting upset, that you might not, have conflict with people. It is more about how you do these things, how you have conflict, and how do you react to something. And so, if you're angry, you just notice that you're angry, and then you come from a place of choice. Mindfulness gives you this sort of moment or this pause between an impulse or an impact of some word or action that comes at you, and then the way you respond to it. And so, in that moment, you choose your reaction or your response rather, and that makes it a mindful moment. But it doesn't mean that you're a doormat that people can just tread on any way they want to. It actually gives you an inner calm, I think, that is actually strong and to me speaks of strength. And it's almost the opposite of doormat, I feel. You don't have to
Mhm.
yell back, but you're going to be responding from a place of calm and focus, and that gives you the power to actually be effective out there in the world instead of being a doormat. Not that doormats aren't effective, sometimes you need them too, right? So
But okay, so we were saying that one could actually be angry and
yeah.
still be mindful of one's anger and maybe use that in the world. Can you think of an example of someone who might exemplify that?
Well, I mean, I have not spent any time personally with the Dalai Lama. That, of course, is always the highest example that I can come up with. But um, I can't think of any person at this moment. Well, other people like I very much admire former President Barack Obama, who I think embodies mindful leadership because he was always able to respond in a way that makes you feel like you're being heard and that he's very present, um, and also sometimes showed emotion, but they come from a calm place, from a focused place. It didn't come from sort of like a reactive place, right? Like
Hmm.
he didn't would just throw the ball back. He would sort of like wait a second or 2 seconds or 10 seconds and then say something or react to something. So that's somebody who comes to me in who I think embodies mindful leadership.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and there's some others, but that might be good for
Oh,
now.
that's good. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So a person can be assertive, they can be tough, and still be mindful. Um, and but so we did say that one would be mindful with could be mindful with anger. I think one couldn't be mindful and or I would say that hatred though. There's a distinction to me. I make a distinction between anger and hatred,
Yes,
and
yeah.
maybe you make that too. And perhaps you can
Yes. Thank
say
you
something
for
about that.
thank you for bringing that up, Rick. We talk about the two wings of mindfulness. Um, one wing being presence, and the other one being kindness, you might say. You know, there's some other expressions for that sometimes or other word usages, but somebody who is just simply out, to be focused, concentrated, and effective so that he or they can harm others. That's not mindfulness, right? That's just a human being that's, in my mind, maybe has some wounding or something. If this presence, this present moment awareness is not accompanied by an openness to learning, by curiosity, by a certain degree of generosity and kindness, to me, that's not mindfulness. So it has to have
Mhm.
those two wings.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
so I agree with you. Hatred would not fall in that category. That's something that, really makes you narrow and, wants you to take revenge or do worse things to people. That's not
Hmm.
mindfulness. That's just
Okay.
an emotion that hopefully people don't have too much of, that you have to interact with. But of course, it's out there, and sometimes people have that emotion. But
Yeah, and I see hatred as being non present moment because you might be angry about something that happened, an injustice that happened right at this moment, but hatred is often about the past.
exactly,
It becomes a habit, and I don't think it's obviously it's not compassionate, but I also don't think it's a present
I,
focus.
I agree 100% with that
Yeah,
statement. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, and as you know, social media does seem to well, I guess I should ask you, do you think social media has made people more reactive and less mindful? That would be my view. And if so, how could a person, number one, consume social media in a more mindful way and perhaps even produce social media in a more mindful way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mindfulness offerings on social media. So number one, right? So that is definitely it's very possible to do that in a mindful way. Your question, yeah, I think I agree with you. Social media, especially those sites like Instagram or Facebook, that are often luring us in and keeping us there because the likes that you get and the reactions you get from people, those I think tend to make us more reactive because we see something and we can, oh, I can respond to this, and even though we might not say it, but we kind of, this is unconscious or subconscious feeling of how am I going to be seen out there, what kind of reaction am I going to get, and that's not really being very mindful. That's kind of like, that's very reactive in my opinion as well. So how can we avoid that? I think one thing to me would be to limit your exposure to social media. Not that you have to have, half an hour each day or something like that, but just to be aware, like when you become And you get sort of in an autopilot mode. You open your Facebook or your Instagram every morning and you just kind of go through them, but you don't really take anything in.
Hmm.
That for sure is not mindful. And so when you notice yourself, or when you just sort of look at, what can I respond to, or and then what does that look like for others when they read this post? That's when you're not mindful, because then you're not really in the present moment. You're kind of thinking about the future or what's happening out there. So in that sense, I try to limit my intake of social media. Sometimes it's more, I don't have a hard and, a firm rule about it, but when I notice that I'm kind of doing it just for the other purposes that I just mentioned, then I
Hmm.
try to get off. But there's a lot of good apps these days, a lot of good apps, and there are always coming new ones on the market.
You can recommend a few right now if you.
Well, I follow a mindfulness teacher that is not a mindfulness teacher sort of from the very beginning, but it comes from the opposite, from news, who's Dan Harris. He is sort of a skeptic, a former skeptic, and now has fully embraced this new path, and has a done, he used to be with an outfit called Happier, and this book is called 10% Happier, his first book
Hmm.
that I really, really recommend, and like in which he sort of describes his path from being a skeptic to somebody who was more convinced of the
Hmm.
benefits of mindfulness. But there's a lot of, I mean, there's Calm, there's Headspace, there's Breathes, Breethe. Just all of those offer ways to learn how to meditate, practice how to meditate, be in community. My very favorite app that's also largely free is called Insight Timer,
Uh-huh.
community of worldwide meditators. And you can always see where people are from. So, you get a notice in the morning that says when you open it up, 50,000 people in your neighborhood are meditating, or in your town, not maybe that would be a little much, but
Yeah.
so anyway, there's a lot of free meditations divided by subject and situation that you're in. One time I broke uh, my hand, my wrist, and
Oh.
I saw
Uh-huh.
something on Headspace, which is a paid app for the busy professionals, and it said it was a meditation for healing fractures. And so I said, I tried
Uh-huh.
this and did it for 30 days. And I don't know whether that really healed my fracture more quickly, but I felt a lot better about it. And
Uh-huh.
I focused on my energy on the fracture and all the other sort of bones around it. And it just helped me, I think, be more in charge of my own healing process. So
Okay.
that was nice. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, good. Um, and so we still have a little more time, so I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions. The I'm just wondering if appeals to positive emotions can also lead to reactive decision making. And example, I was a budget director at a university some time ago, and there's all everyone is always forwarding requests for funding because they're worthy. Um, uh, these are all worthy initiatives, but you have appeals to emotions. Certainly negative emotions I think are most destructive, but I think one has to sometimes also be mindful of appeals to positive emotions in order to, as a budget director, I said I have to bring my cognition in, and I distinguish between when we talk about judgment, I distinguish between kind of emotionalism in terms of judgment and cognition. And you do have to make judgments about how much money the university can afford, things like that. So, uh, can you think about mindfulness and reaction to positive emotions? Let's say.
Well, I think there's studies, of course, neuroscience, that we kind of tend to glue onto negative emotions, right, or negative news, but positive emotions tend to expand it, though, on the other hand. With mindfulness, I think what you bring in is all parts of you to the table. You bring your body first of all, because that's what's immediately accessible to you, including your breath. You bring your emotions and you bring your mind to the table, like you said, the cognitive part. So it really is important to listen to all these parts of yourself and see what information you get,
Mm-hmm.
so and then you make a decision that's kind of holistic and integrated,
Okay.
and you take into account things like you said, what are the facts here, what can we afford in your situation as a budget director. um, but there's also the thing called gut feeling, and so that's partly your emotional state and your intuition. You listen to that, and sometimes you just decide things because you know there's some weird feeling in your stomach or in your shoulders, tension, and you realize, oh, your body's telling you something. And so you need to look at all these layers of information, I think, and then you can make a good decision. And sometimes, if you weigh things like you had to do, then positive doesn't always mean it's a go, right? Or it doesn't always
Yeah.
mean it's a
Yeah.
it's a helpful thing. So,
Yeah.
but if you do the scan, as I would call it, right, through those different levels that I just described, I think you get a more holistic and a maybe more substantiated decision that can lead to better outcomes.
Okay,
Hopefully,
great.
yeah.
So I think we've come to the end of the interview, and there's one more question I wanted to ask. I read on your website that you are an avid soccer fan.
Hmm.
So a lot of Americans think soccer is boring because there's not a lot of scoring. How could someone bring mindfulness to watching a soccer game to make it more enjoyable?
Well, if I can just take 3 minutes here, because it's funny, but at 12 o'clock today, I'm going to be interviewed, or I'm going to participate in the volunteer tryouts for the FIFA World Cup, which takes place next year in the US, Canada, and in Mexico. Huge event. Last week we had the drawings for the group stages, and so it was, I mean, the whole world was watching. It's like Super Bowl times 100. Actually, somebody said it's like watching a Super Bowl every single day for a whole month. So anyway, so I'm gonna do the tryouts today. Yeah, the thing about a draw, and my partner says the exact same thing. I can never get her to watch a whole game because, oh, it's so boring. You kind of have to look at the process of and at the unfolding of the game, and really remind yourself, if you can. But it's hard as an American because it's always about winning and losing in the US, right? In US culture. So, and I'm an interculturalist as well by profession and by training. And so a lot of my work was about telling people that's not just everybody in the world, is about winning and losing. There's some people that are just kind of like being in the game, right? And that's what soccer is. It's about being in the game, and it's called the beautiful game, not the beautiful goal, right? So you enjoy the strategy that the players unfold on the field, and it's a very autonomous game because the coach is on the sidelines, but it's not like in football where the coach gives you exactly, or in baseball gives you instructions. This is what the team does. This is what you do, or the quarterback. In soccer, it's the 11 people on the pitch that decide what's happening. It's the attackers, the midfield, the defenders. They play together in this beautiful sort of, I don't know, weaving in and out of things. And for me, if a game is 0-0, but the game was pretty, and the goal chances were exciting, then I'm totally happy. But if you grew up with this mindset of there has to be a winner, then just one more anecdote. At the last World Cup in the US, I think it's like 26 or 30 years ago now. I was watching it sort of on the sidelines. I just arrived in the US from Germany. There was a game, I think it was the US playing Belgium, and it was a 2-2. And the headline in USA Today the next day was US scores half victory. I'm like, oh, it's not a half victory, it's a draw, man. Can't you just take a draw? But like it's what you said, we're not used to that kind of stuff. So if you want to be more mindful, you can practice it, watching soccer, maybe give yourself at least a half time, 45 minutes, and just enjoy, the thing, how it's all woven together
The
instead
sort
of,
of acrobatics of the game, I think.
yeah, exactly. The beauty and the passing and the drawing back. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
stuff and it's done by the players, not by the coach. So
Hmm.
that's interesting as well to me.
Okay, well, thank you. I really enjoyed talking with you, and good luck this afternoon then.
Yes, thank you so much, Rick. I enjoyed talking with you as well. And hopefully you'll watch some soccer next year.
Okay,
Okay, bye bye.
bye bye.